Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm back as your host this week, Alex, and with me I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. I have to get used to being back on this side of the mic after two great weeks from Lauren the last 2 weeks. But um, we'll start with the first game from the weekend, which was the disappointing league defeat to Bristol City, where at different points in the game, City really looked like they were taking it up to Bristol City. Drew level through a goal from Bowen, but really it was just, I guess, usual story for us so far this season that our legs sort of ran out in the second half, and they managed to get two goals past us late on.
Yeah, it's it is becoming a bit of a recurring theme, and I think we said like in within those first couple of games that we said, that it's we can sort of forgive it. I could forgive it then, but I guess probably after we got the game this weekend and then a couple of weeks off. I probably after the international break, if they're not being able to put in for the full 90 minutes, then it sort of gets to a point where you're going, well, they've been in like it's season, they've been in season training for six weeks or so, and if they're not fit enough now, then we've got a bit of a serious problem. But I think generally there's some really good signs. It's just that last, yeah, just in those second halves we're sort of fading off a bit. But um, yeah, there's good signs, but still plenty to work on.
And I guess it was even more of an indictment given the fact that Bristol City had two players go off with injuries. So, um, you sort of hope that when the opposition team has had to make two early subs, that they're the ones that are going to run out of legs and that you're going to be able to run over the top of them. But I guess in a way it was encouraging to see that McGann responded to the way the team was performing and made changes and brought in Fleming at left back, as I'd sort of discussed as a possibility last week. Um, Obviously, it's a very high stakes, high pressure sort of game for him to debut in, given the fact that Bristol City are a pretty decent side, but they really sort of capitalised on the sort of weaker fullbacks that we played.
Yeah, I think over the last couple of games, with was Fleming played the last two or Mackenzie? I'm
I
tripping
think
out for a second.
I think it was Mackenzie who had played the last couple, and then he came out of the side for Lopez this week, and then Fleming had been
Yeah,
in the cup, but I think it had
yeah,
basically been Kingsley the whole time through on the left.
yeah. Because I remember in not Bristol, but the previous games, Blackburn and just a little bit of positional stuff, and I think just not quite enough. Just the combinations weren't quite working with Grzycki not maybe coming back to give him enough help. And he got caught out, and they were able to play him behind a few times. And I think that's been, it's just that sort of what we're saying. Like, there's been a lot of changes and a lot of personnel brought in. Um, and I was hoping to have more points on the board at this already, but I guess we've got to try and allow a little bit of time to find the best 11, because obviously we're still tweaking and figuring that out and finding the best combinations, and getting and building those combinations, and making sure that that the wingers don't get stuck too high, and help to give the cover, and that everyone's doing their job. But
What did you make of McGann's comments, basically saying the same thing, that he had a figure in his head for points and that we were about 3 or 4 points short of that? Um, Do you see that as a really sort of positive thing that the manager is that brutally honest and is marking himself so hard? Or do you think he's he's almost tying his own noose to an extent where if it comes another couple of weeks of no results, then he can't really spin it as a positive if he's already saying that we're well behind his target?
um, I mean, yeah, the argument could be made either way, I suppose. I probably tend to think, I mean, at this stage of the season, um, I think, I mean, you have to have a goal going into the season, and you've got to have your short-term goals and your long-term goals. So I'm assuming that, McCann had has got a points target for when we went into the international break, and we've probably already got to a point where we can't reach that, and so he's probably disappointed with that. But I think in the course of the season, what he's aiming for is probably still attainable, and so I think it's. I mean, he would be very harshly done by if we got 8, 10 weeks or 10 games into the competition and we went, oh well, we've only picked up 6 points and sacked him because we know how many points we had after 10 rounds, 10 games last season, and we got to a point where we were 3 points off the top six. So, and there have been some changes. I mean, but the guys who were contributing a lot of the goals, you know, probably 2/3 of last season's goals are still in this team. So,
Yeah.
we've only really lost Campbell as a major contributor. Um, so, and Bowen's already on his way. It took him a little while to get started last season. So,
Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? I mean, he scored again against Bristol City, and then he scored again midweek against Preston right at the death to take us to penalties. But he's picked up right where he left off, and I still pinch myself that the fact that we've managed to hold on to him.
yeah, it's crazy to think because he's the only
Only
player
player to
only
score
player
over
left
20?
who scored over 20 goals last season who's still in the championship. Um, all of the other what 4 or 5 guys are all up in the Premier League now,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think. And considering like there was so many rumors going on about who had come to watch him and who was interested in taking him on, and then for whatever reason nothing's materialized.
Yeah,
I
to
mean,
our credit, but
to our advantage, absolutely.
Um, speaking of that Preston game, it was another disappointing game midweek. But I guess sort of in the opposite way to the Bristol City game, we played quite poorly in the first half to find ourselves 2-0 down, and then actually played quite well in the second half and got it back to 2-2 with, as we said, Bowen scoring right at the end. It was an interesting game. I guess we made the 9 changes from the weekend, which gave the squad a good chance to play. Um, Magennis probably my pick of the players in this one. Just seemed to really get, take his chance quite well. But it's a promising display without getting the result, I guess.
Yeah, I think Magennis, from the couple of opportunities he's had so far in the cup and his cameo in the league, I think he's real close to really making a push, into that squad. I think it's only going to take an injury or a dip in form really, to see him in. And again, it's early days, but there's a lot of talk about Eves going, 5 games now and no goals. How long do we let that continue?
What's your take on that one?
I honestly think that I think he just needs one. I think he's looked really good and he's looked
Mm.
dangerous and he's looked promising and he's been involved in a lot of really good stuff. He just hasn't been the one, giving the end product. Like he hasn't been the one putting the goals in, but he's been involved in a positive way in a lot of the goals that we've scored. So I think when you think like, I guess like the main marker for a striker's, centre forward success is goals scored. And on that regard, sure, he's failing, but I think in terms of how he's fitted into the team and his performances as a whole, as a player, I think he's performing fine. I don't think there's any reason to panic yet. And I feel fairly certain that I think he just needs to get one. Um, and then I think he'll just take that little bit of pressure will come off himself, and he'll maybe just relax a little bit more. And I think he'll score fine. I have no problem seeing him hit double figures this year. In all honesty.
Yeah, and look, I think I said something similar last week that it's really just a confidence thing. I think when you join a new club, especially, there's that pressure to perform, and coming from a club where he was so prolific, even though it was the league below, there's that extra pressure when you sort of look at the figures that he was producing. I think it's so unfortunate that he missed a penalty because even though it's a penalty in a penalty shootout, it's still finding the back of the net. It still gives you that little bit of belief. And it wasn't a poor penalty by any stretch. I mean, it's not as if he skied it or hit the post or anything like that. It was just keeper went the right way. So a really unfortunate start for his career, I think, so far at City. But I think you're right. Look, he's worth persisting with. It's been only 5 or 6 games. It's really not worth panicking about, as some City fans on social media have done. And that's probably only going to get in his head worse. And you already hear the comparisons to you think back to your Michael Turner, I think it was, Boaz Myhill, even Michael Dawson in his first game against Villa looked absolutely awful. And all of these players, given a bit of an opportunity, have actually turned out pretty well. So um, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater at this stage of the season, I don't think. And I think he will definitely come good. He's just got to find that goal or two, and then I think it'll start to click. I mean, you sort of referenced it earlier, but Bowen started last season quite poorly or quite slowly, and then sort of a month or two into the season really clicked and went on a huge scoring run. So all these things, it's all confidence, it's all form, and I'm sure the goals will come for him before too long. Um, we've got the game this weekend ahead of the international break against Millwall away from home, which will be a pretty tough game as it usually is when you go down to Millwall. They've started the season pretty well, up in 10th position with 2 wins and 2 draws on the board already. Um, it's a tough one to call in a lot of ways. I think, a couple of weeks ago when we were looking a little bit more attacking and positive, I would have been a little bit more confident, but I would still back us to get something out of this game. It just, I guess, depends on whether it's all 3 points.
Yeah, I think when we go, Millwall's always a tough proposition for us. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think I'd like to see. Um, I guess I'd like to see Magennis get rewarded for a good performance against Preston with a bit of, with a 20 minutes or half hour or something at the end of the game.
Yep.
But apart from that, I guess I can't really think of many personnel changes. I don't really think there's anyone who's. I know Lehigh's supposed to be back.
Yep.
But apart from that, like I don't. There's not many positions really where it's that someone's like banging on the door, or that someone's stuck in the mud, so to speak. Like most, I think overall the performances are okay. It's just the end product that's eluding us for the most part. I think we've been creating plenty of chances. It's just finishing. So I think in terms of personnel, it'll probably be much the same, bar the one or two changes from the weekend. But uh, in terms of results, I mean, I want to say that we'll win. I really want to, but it's just the I guess the form line and the just the nature of the performances and that sort of consistent pattern of performing well for maybe say like 45 minutes to an hour, and then sort of just slowly fading and allowing them in, the opposition to really come at us late in the second half, is pretty concerning. So I guess I'd have to go like a 2-all draw.
Yeah, I think we should be able to get a few goals. It's looked a little bit bleaker in the more recent games against Bristol City and uh, who did we play before Bristol City?
Uh, Blackburn, wasn't it?
Blackburn, yeah, that's right, where we didn't score. But hopefully we can get back to scoring. And I think, as you mentioned, Lehigh probably coming in at right back should hopefully give us a bit more of a sturdy defence. I'd like to see Fleming continue at left back. I think when you're going to throw a kid in like that, you don't want to drop him after one game. It kind of wouldn't do a whole lot for his confidence. I know he did play midweek, but I guess having another league game under his belt would be good. Um, Yeah, I mean, it's a tough ground to go. I think if we can take a point, I'd be happy enough with that. But obviously, it'd be great to get a win right before the international break. Would fill the squad with a bit of confidence. Magennis going over with Northern Ireland will be good for him. I don't know if there's a whole lot of other international activity. I presume Grzycki and I guess Dicko will also be travelling. But apart from that, I guess the squad's largely going to be back in Hull, I guess, working on fitness and training and working on formations and that sort of thing. But yeah, look, a win would be a good way to finish off before the break. Um, the break also spells the end of the main transfer window in Europe, and we've heard comments from McGann in the last couple of days or weeks about a couple of players, Marcus Henriksen and David Milinkovic, both looking for new clubs. The suggestion basically being they've both played their last games for City. Um, I guess it leaves us with the interesting situation that if neither player finds a club, what do we do? Do we just, I guess, sort of try and embrace them back into the fold? I guess Henriksen's the more difficult one because we've essentially bought his replacements. But yeah, what do you make of the situation?
Um, yeah, not. It's an interesting one. It who was it? Was it Grzycki last? Was it Grzycki at the beginning of last season where the same thing happened and we were all but certain he was going to go, and then
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he was
He was in
basically
Turkey or
stood.
somewhere.
Yeah, he was basically stood down for the first couple of games and said, "Look, just go sort out your future. Um, we won't play you until you can just so you're not distracted." And then it never eventuated, and we just he was worked back in. But I mean, he was far and away the best option at in his position. I think in terms of Henriksen, you're absolutely right. It would be very difficult. Um, Having had him sit out for so long now, part of the preseason and these first lot of games, to then find a spot after you've brought in the all of these guys, the Lopez and all these guys that are actually midfielders who are currently playing out of position in the in the on the park. So it's an interesting one. In terms of Milinkovic, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's just there seems to be this persistent thing. I mean, I have no knowledge of exactly McCann's reasoning behind it, but there seems to be this persistent talk about Milinkovic's like lack of dedication and focus in terms of like training and in that regard. And I think was it this preseason he got fined for turning up late or something,
Well,
or was that last year? I can't remember.
he was late back this year, but I think they said he had special permission, but perhaps it was last year that he was late back at some point.
Yeah, I just remember. I vaguely remember something
Yeah.
about him being. He got fined by the club for something. I think, in terms of in regard to either not turning up for training or something. And it's that sort of. I guess that's now the image that we have of Milinkovic is of I guess, a lazy, disinterested um, player. But I mean, yeah, we were mentioning before off air about when he looked all right in the cup match, the cup game against was it Tranmere. Um,
Yeah.
he looked all
Two
right
assists and a
then.
goal, I think.
Yeah. And then before you know it, we cut to this week and he's not in the squad, not in the match day for the cup again, and there's talk that he's free to leave and pursue other interests, and he's still got a year and a half on his contract. So
Yeah, and it's a weird one because I mean we sort of talk about it, it's you look at the players that we've brought in
actually,
over the
it's 2 years, isn't it? Not a year and a
yeah,
half.
you look at the players that we've brought in recently, and at different times they've looked impressive or unimpressive. Kevin Stewart, probably the most famous example of a player who, when we brought him in, just looked terrible and just didn't look like he was going to settle in at all, and everyone was sort of writing him off. And he's now, you know, if he wasn't the most improved last season, he certainly is this season. He's one of our most important and best players. Um, and for other, and Device and Burke down back have looked fantastic. But then there's others like Milinkovic where it just hasn't worked at all. And I guess I guess when you're recruiting the way that we have been, where it's a little bit more of a dartboard strategy, where Device, for instance, just came out of nowhere from a European stock. Then you've got Terrell from Arsenal or Irvine from Burton. It's sort of kind of all over the place, and you're bound to not hit on all of them. And I guess Milinkovic just is one of the misses that we've made. But by and large, I think we've actually done quite well with the signings, surprisingly, I guess, when you actually look at the strategy or look at how we've brought players in, it's somehow ended up working out better, more often than it's not worked out, which is quite fortunate. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird one because he seemed to do reasonably well in Scotland. I think he had quite positive reviews in Scotland. So, not quite sure why it hasn't worked out, but maybe it's just one of those ones where it started off poorly for him and he kind of struggled to adapt, and then was sort of not really given a spot in the team because we had Grzycki and Bowen doing so well, and he just kind of gave up.
Yeah, not sure, but it's a shame because as you're saying, like I was just thinking about all the different players, and trying to pick out players that have like you would consider failures, and I'm thinking back, and I like Mbakani
Yep.
is one who really underwhelmed in
But
his
in terms
time,
but in terms of
but
permanent signings, well, I guess maybe
yeah,
Will Keane.
yeah, I guess he's the only one who. Did he score a goal for us at all?
I think he scored one last season, from
Yeah.
memory. Um,
Yeah, so
Probably, oh, and James Weir, I guess. James Weir was just a weird one.
uh, uh,
Pardon the pun.
yeah, that was definitely that yeah that was Phelan's thing,
Phelan,
wasn't
yeah, it was a double
it?
signing from
And yeah,
United.
that was our deadline day panic
Yeah,
stations, grab
just try
whatever,
and grab
just
something. Yeah.
yeah, throw the paint, throw it at the wall and see what sticks. Um,
Um, and
approach to signings. So.
and of course Weir has now joined Bolton, so he's, I think, almost their only senior player, which is quite incredible. But of course, good news for Bolton fans with that takeover confirmed this morning, so they're now out of administration. So hopefully things are looking on the up for them. But the more unfortunate news, I guess, was the decision around Barry yesterday, expelling them from the Football League. So we thought for a football flashback for this week, we'd look back on our trip at Bury a couple of years ago in the FA Cup. I think it was a third round fixture. It must have been, if we because we were championship at the time, so it would have been third round. And we won 3-1 down at Gig Lane, and Akpom got a hat trick, which was quite exciting to see. He had a reasonable season for us, but I think that was probably his real standout game that season. And I guess the other notable event in that one was Timon debuting at left back. So yeah, look, it was an FA. There's been a lot of those sorts of lower league FA Cup ties over recent years, but it was a great ground for the team to play at, and a great team to come up against.
Yeah, it is a shame to see see a team like Bury be have to drop um out of be expelled from the football league. It's a bit of a shame. A club with a lot of history. And I guess I've just been looking at it and thinking that I guess it really puts into perspective how bad things can be. And
Yep.
when you look at all the various complaints about City, you know, we're not, and I don't think we're anywhere near that level at this stage. Like at the point where we would be expelled from from the football league. So just putting it in perspective shows like it's really not that bad at City, regardless of whether you do or don't like the Allams and how they operate. So
Yeah,
you know, it,
we still bring, like, we reduce our budget, and people can say it's asset stripping or whatever it is, but it's not. Um, we'll sell your Maguires and presumably when it comes to it the Bowens and everyone, and the owners will take the majority of the money, but they still have enough players at the end of the day to form a squad. There've been times like at the start of last season where we didn't really have any defenders for a little while in pre-season, but we always kind of put a squad together at the end of the day of varying qualities, but at least we always have the players, the wages get paid, and looking at some of the ratios you see of wages to income at clubs, where clubs are living at 150, 180% of their income, and we're down at 50%, so we're in a very sustainable model. You're right, like you can criticize the Allens for a huge number of things, but at least, and look, I mean, it depends how this season pans out. Now that we don't have parachute payments, we'll see how the financials look. But at least at the moment, the club is being quite financially well run.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is even with the various points where we've had depleted squads, the infamous photos in Portugal, and the various things. Like, there's never really been a point, I don't believe, where we've been consistently like unable to match our competitors. I think even when we played in the Premier League and we were like, our squad depth and squad quality was vastly below, I think for the most part we played pretty well and we matched up fairly well against most of
Yeah,
the games and teams in the division. So,
at the start of that
um,
season when we had those 11 players fit, the 11 players were still essentially Premier League quality players. It was just like you say, there was that lack of depth, or through injury and sales at that point.
so it's we didn't go through the whole season and only pick up 12 points or anything. Like, I think we still, last time we got relegated, we ended up 9 points, I think, off safety, but we still had 30 odd points. Like, we had picked up plenty of points throughout the year. I don't think we were ever vastly outmatched or anything. And I think that's just another positive to take, I guess, the silver lining from the situation. It just puts our situation in perspective. But I mean, I guess, in terms of Berry, I guess it's just, good luck to them. And I mean, maybe, hopefully they can, I guess, start at the bottom. Maybe they can rebuild and come back um, in a in many years' time or something.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back on that game and looking at the lineup because Ryan Taylor did not play a whole lot of football for us, and he was in that side at right back. But there's a couple of pretty solid players in there who served pretty well for City for a long time, with Jakupovic in goal, Myler, Elmo, Aluko, Huddleston in midfield. Dawson at centre back. I mean, we were playing Michael Dawson at centre back in that game as well, which was maybe a testament to a few depth issues of our own at the time, but Diomande up top as well. So it was an interesting lineup, and you know good to see. I think the main thing from that game was probably Timon making his debut, because he then went on and played pretty well against Arsenal in the cup as well, and then got his chances in the league as well under Silva the following season. So um, yeah, good to see him get his chances as well, and yeah, it was a decent fixture.
Yeah, it was a good fixture, and that was a good run that we went on. Ultimately coming up short.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully we can get the result this week against Millwall heading into the international break. So until we'll be back, not next week, but the week after, to recap that Millwall game and then look ahead to our following league fixture. But thank you for joining me tonight, Dan.
Not a problem.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
This is on fire. We're going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're out.